Alright, hey devs, this is Anslayer aka the Jacobian, and this is just a quick little video to give you my feedback on the heroic items. I did a patch feedback stream a little bit back, but this I've played around with it a bit, and I'm here to give some more. So, whenever I'm on feedback cards, I always like to do it in the context of the items they're offered. Because that's the only place you really experience them. I obviously don't have the legendaries in front of me, but I have a lot of them off the top of my head, so I'll try to mention them where I can. So let's start with the blades. So first off, blade slots very heavily contested. Some of the strongest items are in the blades, so both for melee purposes because of double strike and the throwing Star/Iron Knives at volley fire. So there needs to be pretty high quality stuff on these because blades are typically going on my characters with blade slots are often going to be your core characters. So yeah, so we'll just going through. So starting with probably the worst heroic, Critical Strike is up there for not just one of the worst heroics, but like one of the worst cards in the game. Um, yeah, melee attack 3, all damage bonuses do count triple. Um, I think the best way to explain this is just to open up, just go to a blunt weapon and look at, oh, where's a mighty blow? Where's a mighty blow? Yeah, so if we go to our potions, we just get a minor strength potion, right? 3 willpower deals 7. Alright? So a character with plus 2 a character with plus 2 attack for a melee character will have the same damage from Mighty Blow as it does from Critical Strike. And Mighty Blow has an upside. Like Mighty Blow, if you don't kill the enemy, the pushback is essentially equivalent to at least 1 willpower because you have to typically spend 1 to move away because you don't want to end in melee line of sight. So, like, and this is in the realm, like Critical Strike is supposed to be super good when you have extra, well, extra damage. So, yeah, like I just take Mighty Blow. Like it's just like the card is just so woefully undertuned. Um like if you're using this without any damage bonuses, it is like such a waste of resources and so infuriating to play with. And if you are, it doesn't even feel good, right? Like you have to get to like plus 3 or 5. You have to get to like plus 5 for this to even start feeling like a card. And it's like, so yeah. So if you for this card to work, generally speaking, for melee attacks, 2 willpower deal 6 is pretty fair. Double strike is 2 deal um, 4, but it has the massive upside that you get an extra, typically friendly auto. So it's like 2 deal 5, and it also has the upside of proccing defensive stance a lot. Charge has charge can essentially deal 5, but has an upside. So like most like 2 willpower deal 5 or 2 willpower deal 6 is typically around fair. And for a card like this, heroic is typically a downside because you have to wait specifically for it to happen, which means it clutters your deck from good stuff because it keeps recurring over and over and over again. And based on other heroics you have, like the not crush, but where's the wild? Where's the barbaric blow? Like 2 willpower deal 6 is totally reasonable. So yeah, I just changed Critical Strike to 2 willpower, deal 6, all damage bonus discount triple. Or if you're a little concerned about that getting catastrophic, with like perfect aim, which perfect aim isn't that good of a card, but if you were to, you could do like 2 willpower, melee attack 5, all damage bonus discount triple. Would probably be around where I'm starting to get interested in this card as something. But as it currently stands, like the base longsword is 1,000 times better than the Radiant longsword. And likewise, like long spear. It's an interesting item, but right now it's just completely like unplayable because of critical strike. So yeah, critical strike, very awful. Next up, multi-shot. So multi-shot is we go from the worst to the best. Multi-shot's probably my all-time favorite heroic right at the moment. So from the last patch, it got buffed by 1 damage, I want to say, or buffed by 1 willpower, I forget which. But the biggest buff to this was actually the fact that you put it on Throwing Stars and the Gossamer Bow. And you removed, I think there was like an epic longbow of some description that used like headshots and stuff that had multi-shot. I forget if it's like Gossamer, but anyhow, the point is that it is now on the 2 items that are like the 2 types of weapons, the short bow class and the throwing star class, which are typically the core items you put on ranged characters. You either try to trigger volley fire a ton, or you try to cycle a lot in the alchemist case, or both. The fact that those classes can now have this really powerful tech card that lets them essentially aid, or if you get 2 of them, even flesh out the entirety of the AoE you need for super annoying fights is awesome. It means that you can go, like, if you high roll, you can go full core rangers, and like you don't necessarily need a elementalist to beat up like the necromancer. Obviously it's not quite enough to, I mean, because it's heroic, you can't just cheese the worm with this, but for like most cases where you want AoE, 1 attack is enough, and 5 is just enough that if you have a +2 power, you're one-shotting archers and dealing with those, and it's at the damage threshold. Like typically, like 6 is kind of the magic number, which is why Evocation plus Fireball or Evocation plus Earth Grasp can clear a lot of stuff. And in the same vein, like multi-shot +1 or multi-shot +2 works really well. So yeah, this card I fitted in lots of stuff. I'll build Throwing Stars or the Gossamer Bow to try to clean up AoE if I haven't found very much, or if I feel like I need a little more and I need to push. I'm leaning more towards a ranger build, or I'm only bringing a ranger. So yeah, awesome where it is, and awesome like in terms of power. It's definitely super strong. It could maybe be 4 willpower, but I don't know. I think 3 willpower definitely feels strong at 3 willpower, and it probably would feel fine at 4 if you wanted to push it there too. But it's, yeah, I definitely like seeing multi-shots, and I will typically go through Great Lakes to pick up an item with multi-shot, or sometimes even craft one. So I definitely craft these on my range builds. So yeah, great heroic, very easy to fit into builds, very powerful. So execute. So the Mithril Mace is not something you really go after. I'm working on some videos to talk about balance and stuff, but currently uh, melee builds aren't that strong for carrying, um, because you have to expend a lot of the cards on the melee builds to get into melee range or maneuver a lot. And all enemies have strong melee options, so it's very dangerous to stay within melee range. So you often lose your powers. So I'm never really crafting maces. Like offensive stance is not really something I'm interested in. And Bash, it's pretty rare that you're going to get more than one card discarded because again, you're typically not stacking damage on melee characters. Um, so that said, execute is useful. Like if I have a mithril mace and I don't have another good weapon like a long sword, um, or a metal sword or a bone sword. If I don't have one of those, but I just want some efficient attacks, I will equip something like a mace and maybe hone off of offensive stance. And in that case, where it's just like something I throw in because I want either a high quality, so that I can reroll a lot, or I just need an efficient attack, execute is good. Being able to just 4 cards chop an enemy efficiently, is even through armor is like it typically, like very often, like in when I categorize like things that are powerful, like single target burst to take out small enemies and clumps is typically up there, and execute just does that. It just deletes a enemy of in particular situations. And so also heroic cards are really good when they're fast because if they're slow cards that you want to hold on to a lot, they're going to pollute your deck a lot. So the fact that you're trying to just throw this out to like bring down numbers quickly, it's solid. Yeah, I like to see, there's things that I'd like to see to make maces better in general, but the card itself, execute, like I'll hold on to, I'll maybe hone a mithril mace and keep it if I'm not feeling desperate that my core needs to do a lot. And it'll definitely help in pretty much most stages of the game. So execute I think is solid. Definitely like the willpower buff, definitely makes it more playable, and the fact that it's heroic doesn't, like, it's a card that you really only use once in a fight typically. So yeah, this is very solid. I say pretty balanced card. So so I haven't gotten Surging Strike very much. So this is a card that I definitely want to experiment more with. I've been playing a lot of Alchemist, and you definitely play like over 6 cards a turn with an Alchemist. And so I could definitely see in those types of situations, like putting a jeweled dagger on a core, especially if I have a lot of extra metal, because typically Alchemist builds are wood heavy. And if I'm not bringing another core that needs metal, I could definitely see grabbing maybe one of these, and especially if I have the blacksmith, grabbing one and then just having a big turn where I combo a whole bot and then just like nail like a boss for 20 or something. Yeah, I mean it's a fine card. Because you're always playing cards, like this is always going to do a lot of damage. So even if you just throw it out, it's probably going to be fine. So yeah, it's just a solid card that I could definitely see have combo potential. I just need to experiment a bit more. Yeah, I don't know. This will definitely take. I'm gonna have to try a lot of builds with multi-card setups to see if this is something I can actually build around. I typically don't take jeweled daggers because they when I want to make melee attacks, I want to have high power density in my character that's making melee attacks, so it's much better to um, uh, have something like double strike. Um, and so stuff like setups and stabs aren't there. And then when I don't want to do stuff with my warrior, then I'm not going to play setup and stab anyway. So, and I find that um, like the rat only has like one blade slot, and he's pretty much the only class that can like really regenerate cards, and I typically don't like to play my rat melee. So yeah, I like the idea of stab and setup, but I just haven't found great uses for them yet. Um, and also setup just doesn't. Yeah, it's I don't know. They do a small amount of damage, and like the willpower saving just doesn't seem to be super worth. Um, so, but yeah, I am like again as kind of like a throw on. It's kind of like the May situation, whereas like as a throw on, I could definitely see Surging Strike, um, being like, oh, I happen to have this. I'm happy to keep having this, or um, though I think in the case of Jewel Dagger, I might actually be a little more interested in actually um, making this if I have a ton of extra mithril available, and I'm playing a build that doesn't require a lot of crafting components, um, which isn't most of them, but I'm experimenting. So yeah. So to the heavy armors, you have Dig Deep. There's a few other items that have Dig Deep on them. I like Dig Deep a lot. So typically your melee characters are more early game focused, and as you go later into the game, they kind of wane off. Dig Deep, I predicted this before and it ended up being right, is this kind of card where it lets your melee characters like have a turn where they can be relevant in the later game. And what that means is that like all those cards and like uncommon resources you've invested into your melee builds can actually be used for a turn. And I had this happen actually in a recent Cat 8 Water Gem win, where basically I was facing the Necromancer and I had Abjuration and Protector, but I didn't have Abjuration up yet, or I had just gotten it up. But I had Protector up, and the Necro had a strong turn that I need to deal with, but also get Abjuration up. And I was able to essentially have a turn where I did a classic, I had the resources to put on defensive stance, wail on the Necromancer to get rid of Summoner, kill a minion, and then get that armor up. And it was because I had Dig Deep. It let me do what I would do on an earlier tier, at an earlier stage in the run later, because it's just a very efficient single target card thing. And what that I would have probably lost on that turn. And so yeah, Dig Deep, it's not always good. It's not always gonna be great, but it's a fast card, which is really great for heroics. And it can push the bounds of what your early game characters can do in the melee slot. So I don't like Dwarven Armor because I don't like Iron Taunt and offensive stance. But yeah, when I see runic plates, okay, Dig Deep I typically don't find on the armor slots. Because I often put runic plates on my cores if I find one. I typically just build metal plates. But if I have runic plates, I'll typically hone off Prepare and then keep Dig Deep. Because it can just cycle for you if you need to. And also because it exhausts yourself, it's not terrible to have on a core, because you can remove it from your deck for 1 willpower. So in the worst case, it's like a head crack, but willpower neutral. and in the best case, it's really solid. So yeah, I like Dig Deep. I probably wouldn't change anything about this card. Um, if you wanted to, you could make it 0 willpower. I think that would make it. Um, yeah, it is because you have to invest 2 cards into it. It's like there's like a lot of the times it feels bad to use it against just one enemy, and that's often the only thing you're engaged with. Um, so yeah, that's I could see a 0 willpower cost version if people didn't feel like this was super strong, um, because it doesn't always feel good. It just like the form of the card is very good. I don't so its use like what it tries to do is very very useful. Um, it's just not that strong in an absolute sense. So if you wanted to see this card like as something that like players crafted towards, I would make it 0 willpower. If you just want to keep this card as something that you're happy to tech in from time to time, you can keep it at 1. But it's if you happen to find it. So, but I'm never building a Dig Deep. Um, Even if I have extra resources, it's not that efficient. But I mean, I'm not sad to see it. So, all right, on to these staves. Blizzard. So yeah, so Blizzard was already here. You added a chilled to it. It basically does the same thing Blizzard used to do, except it slows the melee units down 1 turn more, which I'm happy with. I think the evocation changes nerfed Blizzard a fair bit, so I'm happy to see it get like move away from one-shotting everything to moving away to you're slowing everything down and buying yourself time. And you're only ever casting Blizzard once, and you're trying to cast it in the early portions of the fight, so it works. I'm never gonna build a Glacial Spike. I'd always rather build a Flame Staff, because Fireball is just, in my opinion, a lot more efficient at removing stuff, and like Frostbolt and Driving Coal, like all 3 of the cards on Glacial Spikes are kind of for different situations. Like Driving Coal's a utility heavy item. Blizzard is kind of an AoE control, like a preempt. Blizzard is preemptive. Driving Cold is reactive, and Frostbolt is like you're going for a low mana focused, like overpower stacking or trying to get a single target. So they all do different things, and I'd rather just have a Flame Staff where I hone off Flame Fan and yeah, do that instead. To me, that's a lot more interesting than crafting Blizzard. But if I do find a Glacial Spike, I can typically choose one of Frostbolt or Driving Cold to hone off, and then I'm happy to have Blizzard. So not something I'd craft towards, but it's definitely interesting. If you do want me to be crafting towards this, it dealing 3 damage would help a lot, because that would mean with Evocation you one-shot Rattling Archers, and it helps finishing off a lot. That or just changing the cards on Glacial Spike, specifically to make them cheaper ways to apply long-distance Frost. So if you made Blizzard 4 willpower and Frostbolt and Glacial Spike give 2 Frostbolts, I'd probably also consider crafting towards this for like a freeze build kind of thing. But right now it's not good enough to justify going for like a freeze build, and it's not good enough to justify going for like a freeze over like the power on the Elementalist that stacks damage. It's not good enough to do that, and it's not good enough to be like your reliable source of AoE. So it's just a nice thing to have, but yeah, Yeah, so that's the quality of Blizzard right now. Sunfire. Sunfire is, I don't know anyone who builds Sunfire, and I'm definitely not going to start. Sunfire is pretty bad. So like, so there's a few problems with Sunfire. The So 8 damage. Oftentimes, if you're using AoE with Sunfire, it's going to be 9 damage. 9 damage is enough to one-shot archers, but it's not really enough to one-shot anything else. Um, and so, for this to be an actual area of effect spell, um, you kind of have to cast this on an archer, and that's a very hefty restraint when you're trying to do a solid AoE, right? Like Fireball costs 1 less willpower, and I going to deal 6 AoE damage with Evocation, like 6 upfront damage with Evocation, and then 3 burning, or 5 AoE damage if I have a battle stance up. It's going to do 5 or 6 AoE, and then plus 3 for burning. So it's going to do 8 or 9 very consistently to that 2 radius hex. Sunfire is going to do... It's basically going to do that 8 or 9 to a single target. And if they're positioned well, some more damage to the adjacent hexes. So, yeah, it's just, like, the increase in damage for the restriction just doesn't feel very great. Especially since you're not able to combo it with Evocation and as limited comboing with other stuff. The burning effect honestly doesn't matter at all. And the reason for that is this... I mean, it matters if you're softening stuff up and then finishing them off with Sunfire. But basically, this thing can't combo with anything on the turn you play it, right? It costs 6 cards. And then the next, other than Ignition, is it Ignition? I just want to make sure I got that right. It's in the tomes. Other than Spark. Okay, other than Spark, the next one costs 4 cards. Flame Fan. So you can't Flame Fan Sunfire. You can't set up Burning. And the thing is, Burning ticks down. So you have to hit them either with 2 burning cards, or hit them with a Spark and then Sunfire, or hit them with a the other, hit them with a Immolate, right? And then do it the next turn. So you're never getting this off, or you have to have cheated willpower somehow prior to the turn, which can happen, but like that's a lot of requirements. For like, it's just super situational. So yeah, I mean, sure, it can be 6 mana delete something, or six cards delete something, but like, I don't know, you compare that to Execute, it's like, it doesn't feel great at all. This should if you want to make this card good, I would remove the text of "if this defeats the target." Then I would make Sun Staffs. I would make Sun Staffs if I had the Arcanist. If it said magic attack 8 and each adjacent character deals 4. Because then it's dealing significantly more damage than a Fireball, but it's restricted and it costs 1 more willpower. So, yeah. also the fact that this is heroic is like this thing can't be used against the necromancer because the necromancer almost always spaces his units out, and you have to target somewhere off square. And against boss fights, spending 6 cards to get this out of your hand, this kills a core build. Like, yeah, you basically have to unequip Sun Staff for boss fights. Even against like you can't even use this against the worm. So it's just a very weird area of effect spell that doesn't really work. So yeah, Sunfire still needs to be some buffing before I even consider building a Sun Staff over a Flame Staff. So the new channeling. Wait, where are we? Are we still? Yeah, okay. So channeling basically does the same thing it did before. You spend 4 cards to get more than enough willpower, then you need to spend the rest of them. So yeah, Rally still kind of feels a little bit better. I mean, it is nice that you have the extra willpower. And if you have something that cycles a lot of cards or generates a lot of cards, it's nice. So yeah, this helps you get that mega turn. But I don't know, like heroics, channeling's very much a card you want to put on a supporty character, and I'm never gonna build a Heavenly Conductor for a character that's not a main core. I mean, I'm not gonna build Heavenly Conductor because Lightning Bolt is not a great spell. That can be talked about later, but yeah, so I don't know, channeling. I don't mind having channeling because it is a fast card and it can let you get things in play quickly. And because it exhausts itself on stuff like Rune Stitched bracers, which I'll talk about later when I get to it, I don't mind having it because you get rid of it, and because it is willpower effective, it's not going to ruin a main damage dealer's build to have channeling in the deck. It'll probably help a little bit, but it's not. Yeah, it's not something I'm excited about. It's not something. Yeah, if I wanted to be excited about channeling, I don't know. It needs. I don't know. I feel like it needs to give you willpower benefits this turn and like on future turns too. Or it needs to give you willpower and draw cards. Or it needs to, right? Like the problem with future willpower cards that only give you willpower in the future is they're slow, and you can't afford slow stuff, generally speaking. The problem with channeling is designed to set up a really big turn, but it takes all the cards from your hand to cast channeling. It takes 4 cards from your hand to cast channeling. So it's not going to be the biggest of turns. So like the big turns in this game are typically things that you can set up combo pieces for incrementally and then have it come together. And channeling just doesn't really facilitate that. So yeah, it ends up feeling like you cast channeling for a big turn and then you end up not using all the willpower and you cast a couple decent cards and then you're like, okay, decent turn. Not the greatest, not the worst, but. And so yeah, I've never felt like channeling's been flashy. I've never felt like I've ever wanted to put a channeling in my deck. But I've never felt like, oh my gosh, I have a channeling. Can I hone this off now, please? So, yeah, definitely on the lower tier of heroics, but it's not like Sunfire or Critical Strike. It's not Critical Strike bad, so I give it like a C. Alright, that was staffs. So I don't think there's any potion. Oh, Sanctuary. So Sanctuary is cool. I like the new Sanctuary a lot. I wish it wasn't heroic because then I could cast this a ton. Yeah, Sanctuary is very good at defending a power um, on a turn where you have to play the power but can't get defense on it, or very good at um, sticking a ally in a really dangerous situation to body block for tons of stuff and path everything, um, and then making sure they don't die and you get them an extra turn, or protecting I have actually protected a lot of summons with Sanctuary. I the Sanctuary is almost good enough for me to want to craft it. Um, the problem is that the Sacred Tome and the cards it comes on, the Sacred Tome and the Flawless Protection Potion, the other cards on there are not like Iron Skin and Wing Smash are not really in line with the type of class that are for supporting. Um, the Force Fields kind of are, um, but yeah, Force Field's a mech card. So it's like, I don't know, if I'm including a Sanctuary, I'm basically putting 3 cards in, or 2 cards for 1 card, um, for one good effect. And Sanctuary is an okay card, but one thing about Sanctuary is that because you don't retain any block, it doesn't give block that retains. It just defends. It's kind of like I don't know. I'd say it's balanced. Is what I say. It's like if you compare it to like Stone Barrier, right? Stone Barrier gives you 4 armor. This makes you immune. The upside of this is that you can tank much larger damage values and you can be much more aggressive. The upside of Stone Barrier is that, like, especially if you're protecting a power from random damage, the following turn you're going to have um, that 2 armor. So yeah, it's a fine card. Um, because of it, I'm happy to see Sacred Tomes. I'll typically keep a Sacred Tome because I think that good supporting cards are so rare, and typically I can only really stack up one character that, unless I really need to sell it for cash, I'll definitely keep this. And if for some reason I have an absolute glut of items, I might consider crafting this, but it's not good enough where it's like, I need defense, I need to craft this. There's better cards for that. Um, or like, I need to defend a power, I will craft this. Or I need to hold a line, I will craft this. It's just kind of like, if I have this, I'm happy it's around. So, and that kind of goes for like Flawless Block Potion and Aegis Tome are kind of in the same category with that. So, yeah. I don't know if I have all the potions, by the way. I think there's 3 epics because I haven't seen any others, but like, I don't know. It'd be cool if there's a Flawless Flight Potion or if there was a Purple Acid Vials, because yeah, that'd be useful for certain builds. But so we have the heavy weapons. All right, so Forged Greatsword. So Forged Greatsword, main use of this used to be that it gave you 2 wide sweeps to kill necro creeps, or like the necromancer spawns if you had +1 damage somehow. Or I don't know, it's Fearsome Shout is just really, you almost just rather cast a card rather than Fearsome Shout, like a card that does damage rather than Fearsome Shout. So it's, yeah, I actually haven't found a barbaric blow, so I can't do too much like experience-wise analysis of it. I, I am. So, I mean, it's a very efficient attack, right? Two deal 6 is fine, um, and then the spread damage is good. So like, I'd probably run it. Um, it's yeah. There's probably some fun math you can do to kill specific unit. This so to me this is going to end up kind of being like I have had experience with Siphon Life or Siphon the Siphon one where it's the the adjacent 2x2 hex. And in general, I find that the 3 residual damage to like a large melee clump does end up often finishing something off. This doesn't pierce armor, so it's not always going to do that because a lot of enemies at the back of clumps armor up. Um, but I could see this being. I don't know. The 2 damage really isn't enough for 2 spaces away. Typically, enemies that are 2 spaces away will have 2 armor. So, um, you can think more of this as a deal 6 damage, deal 4 damage to. It's like a 6-4 wide sweep, um, and then there's some weird mathy stuff you can do if you want to finish off specific opponents with allies. So, um, so yeah, I mean, like I think wide sweep is an okay card. So, barbaric blow is probably okay. Um, I'm yeah, it's the fact that it's 1 willpower less is nice. So I don't know, not great, not bad. It's like I'm not gonna make a forged great sword. I'm probably gonna eventually sell a forged great sword. Um, yeah, um, to make stuff like this good, you would you basically need to change Fearsome Shout. Actually, you need to change the the claymores and the great swords, and then the um, other one where Fearsome Shout is uh, uh, 0 willpower, inflicting dispose on anyone in 2 range. The discard a card is not that big a deal, um, and like discard a card is kind of like it like expose like what you're trying to do like when you discard a card you're trying not to kill something because you want them to have a you want their next turn to be a bad turn, but exposed is something you want to do when you want to kill something, especially only exposed one. So for this to be useful, I'd say Fearsome Shout has to be 0 willpower so that you can consistently combo it with your wide sweeps and barbaric blows. Um, or the damage just needs to be buffed on wide sweep and barbaric blow for it to actually like it has to be in like the 6 damage range for the AoE. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what has to change for me to be a little more excited about the great sword, but it's fine. Um, Crush. Okay. So Crush is I don't know. Crush is kind of like an execute card. Um, but it's I don't know. Like so Crush so my problem with Crush is that Crush is a single it's meant to be right when you're talking about melee cards that are 2 willpower or more, you're typically talking about cards that you want to have high impact when you swing them once, right? You don't necessarily want allies to be there to make them good. Um, nor do you really want uh, um, like it's because you have to move. Um, you, the attacks have to either be very cheap, so that you can get a lot of them in to justify you moving several characters there, or they have to be just good on their own. Um, and in the case of the Crush, I have to. I'm like, this is an okay card. It'll probably help me delete stuff in mobs, but what I find is that, like, in situations where I want to be using stuff like Charge or Mighty Blow or Crush, I want to be knocking out a single target quickly. Um, and so if I'm charging an archer on this other side of the map, very often I don't get the extra crush damage. It's worth noting that crush doesn't operate off the side of the board, um, which means that like if you're trying to use this to finish off archers, it's terrible, right? Whereas Mighty Blow is a very good spell, right? It's an expensive way to deal with ranged units, but if you're rushing them down, you can obliterate one with one attack. I'd rather have Execute because it gets through more stuff, but it can do it. Crush doesn't always get the job done. So it's very situational in that regard, where it's only good at getting that critical Execute when you are in melee range. So yeah, I would, yeah. It's also a card that, I mean, it is a fast card. One thing that's worth noting is that I find the enemies tend to cheat a little bit on their AI, or at least they play around clumping up stuff like this sometimes. So you have to really position to get off a good crush. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Mithril Axe, not always something I'm going to keep. Um, it's like you're not trying to end your turn with allies adjacent to enemy minions, so it's not really something you can use against bosses. And the raw damage just isn't enough to justify setting everything up for using against the boss. So it's like, um, I think, I think this card would be more interesting if instead of +3 damage, you repeated the attack for every adjacent target. Um, it's like, so you're just hammering it over and over and over again. Um, because then it would proc nearby opportunity attacks, so it would really wail on something. And then maybe it could actually be used to set up against bosses. I don't know. That doesn't even feel very good at all either. That's I don't know. Maybe if it worked off the edge of the map, it would be better. That'd probably make it a lot better. Because then it'd be. Then if you like cornered an archer and crushed them, it would be good. If you're facing a boss, and they're hiding in the corner, it's good, right? Like the problem with crush is that like if something hides in the corner, right? Like this is a card that's supposed to be good in a trapped situation, and if you're trapping the opponent, very often you don't get crush damage, which is like very unintuitive and feels very bad. And like if you're stuck in the corner, like it doesn't do crush damage. If the enemy's stuck in the corner, it doesn't deal crush damage. If they're stuck against the wall, it does limited. It's like, yeah, that's what makes it feel pretty bad. So I'd probably change that. Make it so that it works on the side of the wall. I actually like that for cover shot too. I think like cover shot's very situational because it doesn't work on the edges of the arena. But that's a different story. So yeah. Talked about Execute a bit. Serrated Cleaver isn't really any more better than the other Execute card. Grapple is and so is Setup. But yeah, I am fine with Execute on Serrated Cleavers. Basically, I have the same opinion as for other stuff. All right. Going on to the bracers. I love the bracers. All right, Rune Stitch Traps. So, Rune Stitch Traps is one of the most powerful items in the game because it gives you abjuration. Um, it used to have offensive stance, which is really good for a lot of characters because it it was often hard to get offensive stance onto characters that were major cores that wanted to hold on to powers. And it was a good like kind of intermittent power that you'd often cycle off for better ones, but it it was decent. Replacing it with channeling is okay. It means that if I remove walk, I can with honing I can just use channeling early in the fight, and then I just have abjuration, and it's a solid card. And like I said before, I'm fine having channeling on cores, so um, yeah. I think channeling's a little weird on this card, because again, channeling is kind of like a supporty card, um, and abjuration is very like a defensive stuff, and channeling's meant for those setting up big turns, um, and so even though it doesn't really do that, so it's like I don't know. It's just, for me, it's just kind of incidental channeling to the card. I still build Rune Stitch Traps all the time because of abjuration, but I I don't really care that it has channeling on it. It's neither a plus nor a minus. It's just kind of like, to me, it's as if like this card just had abjuration and walk on it. That's basically what this means. Um, so yeah, I I dislike it because it's supposed to be a heroic because it's great, but like I in terms of like how I conceptualize the game, I don't care. So, and the grand scheme of things. Last Stand. So, um, I was really hyped about this ability. Um, so Last Stand's really cool. The problem with Last Stand is that armor is a preventative thing, but you drop, but you have to use it in reaction to dropping to low health, and oftentimes, especially late game, when you get this, you're not playing at less than 10 health, and if you drop to less than 10 health, you often die on the same turn that you drop to less than 10 health. Like, you're dropping from 13 to 0. Um, or you're dropping from 13 to 5, but you lose all of your powers and the fight is over. Um, and so, I think that as a heroic, um, I think this card would be more interesting if it read like each friendly hero defends 2+1 for each missing health point for every 2 missing health points, or +1 for every 3 missing health points instead of for each health point of health below 10. Um, because then it would allow you to preemptively defend low HP characters instead of like and like be something where it's like you stabilize and hold off the fight at the critical moment, as opposed to something that's um, like is like a get back up card, because this card doesn't really get you back up. Um, I think another thing this could do is um, I, I another thing this could do is if it like if they were below 10, it um, recycles the deck, like shuffles the discard pile into the draw pile and causes them to draw a card. I think um, it could be interesting because then it would help reset your powers after you lose them, because that's a big thing that happens. Because if this is like a last stand thing, I think doing something to help reset your powers would help a lot. Also, I think it's kind of, I don't know, it's not super fun that this doesn't affect summons. So, yeah, I think it ends up most of the time just being a barrier. sometimes it gets one character a lot of armor in a situation, but oftentimes it's too late for that character to be. It basically prevents a wound in some situations, but like this does not save your. This does not save you against bosses on a bad turn. This does not save you. It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't save you if you're completely surrounded, like with the other heroic. So yeah, I'd probably like to see it. It doesn't necessarily have to be hard buffed, but changed to actual like right now it's so niche when it actually has this awesome moment that it or it actually like does what like intuitively says it to do that it like I'll still take it and I'll still keep it, but it's not going to be the kind of card that I can reliably build around. And I'm not going to reliably build it. A, because Elven Bracers is a very weird card. It doesn't really fit on anything. Like the Last Stand makes Elven Bracers like, okay, I guess I'll hold on to it for Last Stand a little bit, but it's not great. If I want to build a Dwarven Lantern, it is good enough where if I have the materials to like, I will buy a Dwarven Lantern. I probably won't build one, but I will buy one if I see it and I have the cash to. So, and put it on like a supporter character. Yeah. So, a support like character. So, yeah, like Last Stand, but I think it needs to be. It just needs to move to a direction where it's actually useful for, like, saving the team or like getting the like recovering from a bad turn or preventing a turn where you're vulnerable from being catastrophic. It doesn't do that right now. It only like saves you in really bizarre situations. So, but I am excited about it. I think it's a cool card. Helmets. Dig Deep. I already talked about Dig Deep. Basically applies to Dwarven helmet as the same here, but typically, yeah, helmets are kind of a little niche because the cards aren't super great on them. But I am happy to, yeah, if I get a Dwarven helmet, it's chill. Impenetrable Wall. This card is just good. It's a free card and it's free defense sometimes. One thing about Impenetrable, so yeah, it's just free defense sometimes. I think Impenetrable Wall is kind of like the defensive version of Dig Deep, in that when you're facing bosses like the dragon, very often, even if you get like 10 armor, it's not enough to tank. Impenetrable Wall can sometimes give you turns where, for that turn, you can actually, like, all that investment you put into like getting tons and tons of armor with like your warrior, you can actually do. And so I like that. I think Impenetrable Wall I think is fine. It's card neutral. It's fast. It does what heroics do. It's not super flashy. There's sometimes you get a really big protector off. So if you do want to try to combo it for a really big protector turn, or a really big shield wall turn, you can. And but if you think you don't have the time to do that, you can also just play it. And so it's, yeah, I think this is an interesting tempo card. And when it's like, I won't build a shield because it has Impenetrable Wall, but I will if we head over to the shields. It's unfortunate it doesn't have, there's not one with protector. I if the Mithril shield had, I think it'd be more interesting. But yeah, if I find a fortress shield, I'll typically hold on to it. unless I find one with Protector or feel like I need to craft Protector to defend a power. So, or need help defending powers, because I don't think my current situation is strong enough to do so. So that's... But yeah, Fortress Shield is my next favorite shield aside from Tower. Like, if I had to rate the shields, it'd be like Tower Shield, Mithril Shield, Fortress Shield, um, and then Leather Shield. Or metal. Like, Leather and Metal are kind of tied. Um, so yeah, it's I like it as a card. It's like this it yeah, I'm not that incentivized to craft stuff like helms and shields, period. Because they're typically more luxury items, except for the protector, except for getting protector. They're not super core to builds, but like when I do hit it, I will. I am willing to sink a little money into getting um, the Fortress Shield. So yeah, yeah. Yeah, I probably wouldn't change Impenetrable Wall. I probably would just make more ways to make, like, share block or make block effective. Um, yeah, so if you wanted to push the power on Impenetrable Wall. So it's good heroic. I like those tempo like heroics. I already talked about multi-shine Ghost Tomorrow's bow. It's great. Light armor. Heightened senses. Enchanted robes. If you get enchanted robes, you're often putting them on. Enchanted robes is kind of the same story as Rune Stitch Straps. It's just the light armor version, where I'll put enchanted robes on my main damage dealer, remove force field, and keep channeling to discard it and get stuff into play. So, yeah, don't really care. So Marcon armor. This armor is weird. I'll talk about heightened senses in each case. So, the quick step agile stuff is okay. It's good on the Alchemist if you can get different sources of battle trance, or battle stance, and plus to damage. You're often very much reliant on stuff like enchanted robes or the metal plates on the Alchemist, or cores like that. So it's not that effective. I've tried experimenting with Marcon armor and making it or buying it, and it's okay. Heightened Senses works fine in a draw build. It doesn't really work all that well in other stuff. So, like, Macaron armor is like my third pick of armor for the Alchemist, and I'm only ever going to consider crafting or building this if I have like a speed potion, and I already have attuned like a battle stance to my guy, because I found like the soul gem in the Gravedigg event, and I found a battle stance somewhere else. Like that's where I'm going to start considering Macaron armor with heightened senses. Although I think heightened senses plus 2 damage this turn is. Although it's again, this card is very good at having an explosive turn when you're drawing tons of cards, and heightened senses fits right in with that. If you're not doing that, then the card is pretty bad, because 2 cards to, or one card to increase the damage for your turn this turn by 2 this turn is just, I mean, I'd rather just have a power that did that for the fight. So yeah, it's I don't know. It's it it's fast. It is a fast card, and it gets rid of itself. It is a cheap card that gets rid of itself. So I'm not super upset to see it. It's just not great outside its very niche situation. Um, I you could buff it to 0 willpower. Um, in which case it would just be. I'd actually probably buff it to 0 willpower. It would end up feeling a lot like a shield wall in that case. Um, in which case it would be awesome on stuff where you have like a big cycle build, and on normal builds it would be cool. And it would like have like a draw build where you're trying to be draw neutral. I yeah, I like the idea of heightened senses as being kind of the offensive parallel to impenetrable wall. So I'd probably recommend that. It's not a good heroic, except by virtue of the fact that it's good on Alchemist with Resourceful. So, um, yeah, yeah. Outside of that, it's a pretty bad card. Yeah. So, yeah, that's my analysis of Heightened Senses on Marcon Armor. It also appears on Gem of True Sight, which again is kind of the same thing. Like, Gem of True Sight isn't super great because it's it puts a bunch of cards in your deck that are like you're spending willpower on conditionals for them being good, but they themselves don't do anything. So like very often it's like you'd rather just have attacks than have like you'd rather just have attacks and spend your willpower on attacks than have reloads and heightened senses and perfect aims, and try to sequence and get lucky in comboing stuff. So yeah, I think if heightened senses was 0 willpower, it would be like it'd feel nice. So um, it'd feel like you get this nice, quick, explosive turn. And it wouldn't be so much as like something you're trying to combo as something you're trying to like it's just nice, like when you're trying to play a lot of offensive cards in a turn, it helps you do that. um, yeah, so very much how like Impenetrable Wall is very much designed to um, get you to play a bunch of defensive cards in a turn. But yeah. So talked about Dwarven Lantern. Living Chain. I am Living Chain's weird. So this used to have 2 reel-ins on it. You never really wanted 2 reel-ins. So Living Chain is kind of just like, I'm going to make a meat bag that draws cards, or I'm going to give this guy card draw. And in that sense, putting Dig Deep on it is fine. I don't know, I'm pretty ambivalent about Living Chain. I don't know, there's like, I put it on stuff sometimes because, like, if I have a fairly useless character, I can throw this on them, and it's like, I'm gonna draw cards. But yeah, that's like it's like I think Seath's an okay card. Um, Basically, if you get hit 3 times, it's willpower positive, and it concentrates that willpower on a future turn in one chunk, which is typically the best way to get willpower. So, but then again, like if the power is dropped in only 2 attacks, it's bad. You matters by it's what meh, and if you take 1 big blow, it's really bad. So I don't know. I don't know. It fits in the idea sense that like Seethe often lets your melee core have a turn where it wouldn't normally be able to otherwise in the later game, and Dig Deep kind of does the same thing. So there is some synergy there in terms of like the the identity you're trying to build. So, yeah, it's definitely a buff to Living Chain. I'm definitely happy to see Dig Deep over another Reel In on Living Chain. So, um, I think it's a fun card. So, yeah. Though again, I do think it could probably be a little better. Yeah, Sanctuary right on point. I just think Sacred Tome itself needs to be better. But yeah, Sanctuary is like I hold on to Sacred Tomes because of Sanctuary. So that's cool. Immolate. I had such hopes for this card. So Immolate comes on this and the Planar Tome. And so initially I thought this scaled like like a ticked damage each time, and this would be like a new Eldritch Blast. It turns out that's not the case, and I'm super sad about that because I'd love this to be this multiplicative like one-shot burst Eldritch Blast kind of card, but it's not. So that being said, when I do craft Inferno Tones for Fireball, I'm removing Flame Fan and not Immolate. I do think Immolate is fine. 3 deal 6 anywhere. I mean, so the big Immolate is significantly better when you have Planar Tome because 5 damage is enough that it typically shreds most of the armor on the enemy's turn. And against a boss, that means you can often like get to their powers reliably. So Immolate feels pretty good against bosses when you have Planar Tome. And it often will just kill a ranged unit outright with the base damage and really burn down an opponent. So it's like, yeah, like I think this is pretty efficient. I don't know. I'd like to see the combo-y nature of it. I think it's a little bit on the weak side, given that it's without playing. I think if Burning did 5 damage per tick, Immolate would be right where I'd like it to be for a heroic. And so I'm very happy to have Immolates when I am playing a Planar Tome. But yeah, if I'm not, they're okay, and they exhaust themselves, and they do okay damage. So, and again, three ticks burns on bosses. It does shred some armor, so it's like, it's a good card. It'd be much more fun though if you made it so that it each tick did more fire, repeated the damage bonuses. I will say that, but it probably would be a bit busted if that were the case. So, yeah, like Immolate. We talked about equipment. We talked about tomes, blunt weapons. Talked about Crush already. I think we're getting down to our boy. It's finally useful. Oh yes, Life Siphon. So I never really am looking to build Tainted Skulls because Demonic Pack is really bad. That said, if I find a Tainted Skull or I find a Planar Tome, Life Siphon's a fun skill. 3 unblockable damage actually incidentally kills a lot of stuff, and if it doesn't incidentally kill it, it can often set it up to be headshot through armor, so it feels good. It's a nice AoE card. 3 damage is also the magic number that with Evocation you would shot 6 health stuff. So and the targeting area is good enough in general that you can often use this in the Necromancer fight, and you can often use this to clean up really big brawly fights. And it's also fast, and that's the big thing, right? Now that we get the card on hit and it only costs 2, this card feels like I'm never sad to have a Life Siphon. I'm not going to go out of my way to craft it. If the base cards it was on top of were good, right? If the skulls were good, I would craft this. I would definitely consider crafting this if Demonic Pact was more interesting other than just killing itself and killing you and stripping your powers for you and being a pain and just really net power. I would be like, yes, I will. If I have excess mithril and I have like the Arcanist, I would gladly consider crafting Life Siphon. That is one thing to say, by the way. A lot of the reasons why a lot of things I have a hard time crafting is because there's only the Blacksmith and the Arcanist, or I've only found those two. There's nothing to craft the armors, the shields, or the equipment and potions. Like the armors, the bracers, helmet, potions, equipment, shields, and staffs. There's like we only get tomes and totems, and then the weapons, not even the ranged weapons, are the only things that we have crafting reductions for, and those are much easier to craft. Which is why stuff like multi-shot I can actually like use a lot because they're on throwing stars. So yeah, I'd definitely be down to considering Tainted Skulls over Fireballs if Demonic Pact was better. Yeah. In certain situations, or if there are two life siphons on Tainted Skull, I take it. I build it, but I'm not gonna throw out a Tainted Skull unless I really need to, unless I'm throwing it out for a fireball or I'm throwing it out for like a boss or something. So, Life Siphon's good. Life Siphon's really good. So. I like it. It's a fun power. So, and there's one more. I've actually seen this card, but it is. I don't have it in my collection for some reason. We have Heartseeker. Oh boy, Heartseeker. This card's basically just. I mean, this card is worse than Critical. It's basically as bad as Critical Strike. So. 4 willpower, deal 5, deal double if the opponent's exposed. 5 willpower, deal 5 that range, or 5 cards, deal 5 that range is so bad. It's so bad. And then 5 willpower, deal 12 on a conditional is really, really bad, right? Right. So like, if you take this as a 2 card combo with Exposed and Heartseeker, that's, which I think is like the most standard case, or Mark Target and Heartseeker. That's 3. That's 2 cards. That's 2 specific cards. 8 cards played total to deal 12 damage. I can use 6 cards with Headshot and Cover Shot and deal 10 under conditions. And I don't have to do any building around to do that, right? Like Heartseeker, you have to specifically build around. And the base case where you don't get it off is just tragic. It's just so bad if you don't get this off. Because, yeah, you have to build your deck specifically to have exposed, and then you have to conditionally draw that exposed, and then you have to shoot them at it, and then it just starts being fair, right? Like if you look at like headshot is 3 cards to deal 3/6 conditionally. Um, uh, the 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 oh, I forget what the weapon is. I'm derping because I don't use it very much. The snapshot is 2 cards, deal 2, deal 4 conditionally, right? This heroic is like this heroic within a fight on its own should conditionally do 10 damage. But the fact is you have to build around it just to get it to be fair, right? The fact that you have to invest like you have to invest other cards' resources and then have the situation come up for it to be fair is like terrible. It's just not even. And the thing is that the condition for it to come up, which is a target being marked, is even harder than you think, because other than mark target, like it's very rare that you get exposed to last more than a turn. The minion dies so fast that you basically only get that for a turn anyway. So you have to get the exposed on the target you turn you cast it, which means you can't, like if you're maneuvering and doing this, you're spending your entire turn using this, and it's just nightmarish. So for me to get excited about this card has to like win me the fight in many situations for me to actually want to use this. And for that to be the case, do I really not have an Elven Spear? I just have a long spear. Interesting. For that to be the case, it basically needs to, when the condition rises, it needs to one-shot pretty much every non-elite enemy in the game, and then most elite enemies. So my recommendation is that through armor, this should deal 16 damage. Like so if it's raw damage, it should do like 20 something. If it's piercing through armor damage, it should deal like 16, 17 when the target's exposed at this mana cost, or at this willpower cost. Yeah, because otherwise, like, even the base case, this card does not kill an archer. Like the target has to be exposed for this card to even be remotely relevant, and that is just not good. Like when the picking off archer situation, I can do for 2 less willpower better with a uncommon headshot. Like this card needs serious buffing before I'm even thinking about it. And also before you say like this is meant to be comboed with perfect aim, you're not doing that anytime soon, because that is a 9-card combo. So unless you have astral arrows set up, you're not hitting your target with perfect aim in this plus an exposed. It's just not happening. Like the opponent has to line themselves up for you. Like you have like to hit targets with range attacks, it's expected that you have to spend a little bit like with magic attacks you'd spend 0 willpower casting it. With range attacks you have to expect to spend 1 card positioning, and with melee attacks you have to expect to spend 2, because you have to spend 1 moving in and then 1 moving out. Or if you're going for a kill, you have to spend 2 melee cards moving 2 allies in, and then you start whacking them. So yeah, that's not a combo that you can ever reliably consider getting off at high levels of play. So yeah, so that's my take. Overall, I think the heroics are pretty good. There's some pretty fun tech cards out there. I love multi-shot. And I like stuff like Last Stand, even though I think it's a bit weird. I love Protect and multi-shot. Those are probably my 2 favorites. Um, a lot of the melee ones are just not on good enough uh, cards, or like the melee builds just aren't good enough. And so what they do doesn't really cut them uh, do it. But yeah, that's my take on it all. So let me know if you want more feedback or have more questions. I check Discord pretty often, so this is fun, and I'll I'm hoping to do a whole set of. I'm currently in the process of doing a whole set of videos for feedback for you guys. So I just finished a strategic, um, like an overarching strategic video. Um, so yeah, I'm hoping to give lots of feedback on like all the cards and classes and stuff eventually. But since you asked about heroics, I figured I would do this one now. So uh, I will get going and get this sent to you. And thank you for listening and watching and bearing through that whole thing. All right, and Slayer signing out.